Now to our next conversation. Well, the government of Kenya plans to impose a 3% tax on cryptocurrency transfers to narrow the fiscal deficit of the country and boost its domestic revenues. Joining me now is Wachira Kariuki, Head Training and Research, Windsor Brokers, joining me from Kenya. Great to have you on the show.
Fantastic, Mr. Ladi. Pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful to be on this platform as always.
Fantastic. So how much of the Kenyan population trade cryptocurrencies, and how are Kenyans reacting to this proposal here, a 3% tax on earnings?
By the way, because Kenya is probably the most elite and progressive economy in Eastern Central Africa, we may not have necessarily a very high population that is able to trade it, but the number of people, especially in the main cities, Nairobi, Eldoret, Kisumu, that are participating in it, cumulatively, it is estimated that Kenyans hold $1.5 billion worth of cryptocurrencies. All right. So the CBK, remember, is authorized to regulate cryptocurrencies in Kenya, and there's a law called the Kenya Monetary Money Remittance Regulation Act that has been used to govern this. So we've come a long way from 2015, when the Central Bank of Kenya explicitly said that they do not recommend that anybody should trade. They did not ban it, but they have not necessarily come out to be strongly against it. That was in 2015. 8 years later, 2023, it's an absolutely different conversation, and we are optimistic that more and more people continue to participate in cryptocurrencies.
So that means the Central Bank of Kenya right now do not mind Kenyans actually trading cryptocurrency?
Correct. The Central Bank of Kenya's stance was primarily focused on regulation. There was no regulatory presence, there was no structure, there was no process, there was no clear requirement of what a transaction would look like, there was no way of protecting the investors, there was no way of defining and controlling the path, which ironically is the entire point, because the point is to be able to have a way to transfer money outside of the normal mainstream way of banking. But they wanted to be sure that it's not just a speculative asset as it has been in the past, and they wanted to ensure that it is able to be sustainable, controlled, measured, and in a way that would leave everyone better. And they felt it is within their purview as a regulator to oversee that particular issue. So now that they have put better processes in place, we don't have explicit regulation as yet, but there's a bit more structure and process to it, and they continue to build up on that. Remember, the regulatory framework in Kenya regarding on crypto is controlled by two institutions, Central Bank of Kenya and the CMA, right? And they have generally demonstrated a very active approach to regulation. They tend to interpret their powers and responsibilities as widely as possible, and they have demonstrated a continued willingness to include new innovations in their regulatory purview. So they're not necessarily banning and opposing it, they just want it structured in a way that is good. The tax of 3% is quite interesting and very unusual. To want to tax digital currencies is an interesting thing. Remember, it's a bill, it's not yet been passed as a law, Ladi. So there is speculation that it might be adjusted, but it was an interesting insight. It means the government is recognizing it as a source of income. It's recognizing its magnitude, both in terms of size and capacity, and more importantly, the number of people who are participating in it, and they feel they can tap into that to make some revenue for the government, sir.
And in your view, do you think the lawmakers will approve this bill?
I think they'll approve it because it falls under capital markets, and everything under capital markets is regulated. They'll probably reduce it from 3%. 3% is pretty high, especially because they just put another 15% on social media participants and stuff like that. So I think it will be cleared, but probably at 1.5%, not necessarily high at 3%. As a rule, whatever the bill comes in is not the same amount that it passes in the act. It always reduces, because it's always debated and there are always vested interests, and it tends to reduce them. Remember, we're also trying to encourage more people to participate in it because we see the benefits in it. $1.5 billion worth of value in Bitcoin in one country shows that there's clear interest. It means that some people have benefited from it, and we want to see if it can be entrenched into the mainstream investment forum and can be regarded as a proper, well-structured investment going forward. So Central Bank is hoping that there will be more participants, and does it make sense to encourage participation and then put a very high tax to it. So I suspect they'll find a middle ground between encouraging it and taxing the cryptocurrencies as we go along. And we are hoping that there'll be proper regulation in place, and maybe it becomes a mainstream investment. So I don't see it coming at 3%, probably slightly lower than that, but it will be taxed for sure, because it's clearly a revenue stream for most Kenyans, or at least the ones who participate in it, sir.
And I'm definitely wondering if Kenyans do make good gains in the crypto market. But how easy or hard is it to identify Kenyans that own and trade cryptocurrencies?
They're very happy to talk about it, Ladi. They talk about it. They insist about you should talk about. They tell their friends about it, especially when it was doing very well. As with most investments, when they're doing very well, they talk about it. It made some good gains because it was almost doubling and tripling. If you had bought it at 6,000, it went up to 10. It went to 16. It dropped, but now it's back again to 11, 12,000 Bitcoin. So the Kenyans who own it talk about it. In fact, it's one of the investments that has spread by word of mouth. There's a curiosity. Then there's, of course, there's a new generation of below 35, even actually below 30, who are very curious and they're pushing the digital age, so to speak. And once the digital age combines with the digital currency, then turns it into an investment, it becomes, the tripartite holy grail of an investment. You're curious, you're interested, you have control, there's flexibility of entry and exit. And of course, the fact that you're able to avoid the normal mainstream channels of banking and protect your currencies because of the foundation of how Bitcoin and cryptos generally are built is a fantastic thing. So they feel that change is interesting, it's welcomed, it's amusing, there's some capital gain, there's some profits to be made. It is ticking a lot of boxes for the new generation. And I think it's going to continue creeping on and becoming mainstream, and more people are. Otherwise, the average Kenyan who's in cryptos is very happy to tell you they're in cryptos. They don't hide it, they're excited about it. Even when they lose money, they just say buy and hold, because in their opinion, it doesn't have to gain value now. If you just give it some time, it'll probably come back in time and add the value. So it's an asset you can buy and hold. So yes, Kenyans are very excited about it, and we have seen an interesting increase in numbers and even in the demographics of which participating in it, and we think it's going to get better as we go along.
Yeah, it's definitely hush-hush when you lose money as an investor in most of this market. But thank you,
correct.
Thank you so much, Wachira Keriki, Head Training and Research, Windsor Brokers.
Always
Always
a
great
pleasure.
having your perspective.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.